The Chiefs have some big decisions coming up. There are 20 players hitting free agency, and on top of that, they need to fill some gaps with talent that's not currently on the roster. The legendary tight end might be thinking about retirement, and several key defenders could also be leaving. I need to talk about that, including the issues with the wide receiver room and more. But first, let's dive into what's happening next. Starting tomorrow, teams can use the franchise tag on one player. It's not required, but they have until March 4th to do it. For the Chiefs, the most likely player to be tagged is Trey Smith. Now, when I say tag, I'm not trying to sound disrespectful. It's just the term used when a team places a tag on a player to keep them from leaving for free agency. It's a move that can be used for a tag and trade situation, like they did with Larissa Snee. There are definitely a few options here. I'm not saying for sure that the Chiefs will franchise tag Trey Smith, but it could cost them around $25 million to do so. Right now, they have about $5.3 million in cap space, which ranks 24th in the NFL. So, they need to free up more money if they plan to make this move. I'll talk later about how they can create more cap space, but right now, they're not working with a lot. The reason why tagging Trey Smith would cost so much is because it's based on the top 5 highest-paid offensive linemen, not just the guards. Tackles are included, which drives the number up. For example, the highest-paid guard, Landon Dickerson from the Eagles, makes $21 million per year. That's already $4 million more than Trey Smith would get. But it's likely that Trey Smith will become one of the highest-paid guards, though it won't reach $25 million because that would be too high. It's going to cost a lot of money, but the Chiefs could choose to let Trey Smith go and instead focus on other areas, like a left tackle. After all, you can only pay so many players on the offensive line. Right now, the combined cap hit for the Chiefs' offensive line starters is already $64.9 million, and that's just for Jawaan Taylor, Joe Thuney, and Creed Humphrey. However, it's likely that these cap hits won't stay this high for all 3 of them. Joe Thuney could work out an extension, which would make sense given how well he's playing, even at 33 years old. Thuney is actually the second oldest player on the team, after Travis Kelce, although if they re-sign long snapper James Winchester, Thuney would be third. In any case, we should know the Chiefs' plans soon, especially about the franchise tag and Trey Smith. It won't be Nick Bolton because tagging him as a linebacker would cost $27 million, which is just too high. I'll touch more on Nick Bolton later. The Chiefs have several options for Trey Smith. They could tag him as a placeholder until a long-term deal gets done. They have until July 15th for that. Or they could tag him just to prevent him from walking into free agency and possibly get some draft picks in return. They might also let him go and maybe get a third-round compensatory pick. It'll be interesting to see what happens, though there's a real chance Trey Smith just walks. If that happens, the Chiefs will likely focus on finding a replacement, either from within the team, maybe Hunter Norrad or Kingu Maye, or through the draft. I talked about some free agent options the Chiefs could look at in another video, and you can take a look at those names on the screen now for a quick glance. Next year, things could look very different for the Chiefs, especially outside of 2 main players. Let's talk about that, but first, let's get into some important details. Regarding the Chiefs' defense, safety Justin Reid, defensive end Charles Omenihu, and linebacker Nick Bolton are 3 of the biggest players set to hit free agency. Mike Pennell, Turk Wharton, and Derek Nottie are also on that list and have played important roles along the defensive line. Justin Reid is 28 years old and will likely want another 3-year deal. He's played solid football, so why wouldn't he? He's stayed healthy, playing almost every game over the past 3 years, which is a good sign. Reid's last deal was for 3 years and $31.5 million, which averaged about $10.5 million per year. That's just outside the top 10 highest-paid safeties. He's definitely been a strong asset for the Chiefs, but it's worth remembering that the team let Tyrann Mathieu walk around the same age. Reid might be in a similar situation. If the coaching staff thinks rookie Jalen Hicks can step up into a bigger role next year, they could take a chance and move forward with him. Hicks showed some great potential in his rookie season, so it wouldn't be a bad move. Nick Bolton is probably the biggest question mark on defense because of the huge role he plays. While he's been a key piece for the Chiefs, excellent against the run, smart on the field, and a great leader as the Mike linebacker, he does have some weaknesses. His coverage skills and lack of top speed become obvious when he's chasing players to the outside. More often than not, they get the edge on him if they have the right angle. Bolton struggled with injuries, especially in 2023, where he played about half the season, but he bounced back this past year and was able to play most of the games. He's made some big, clutch plays during his time with the Chiefs, like the tackle he made for a loss against the Falcons late in the fourth quarter, helping the Chiefs win the game. According to SpotTrack, Bolton's market value is around $12 million per year, though it could go up to $14, $15, or even $16 million. That would put him among the top 5 highest-paid linebackers. Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs' defensive coordinator, has praised Bolton and called him a key piece of the defense. The good news is, Drew Tranquill is under contract through 2026 for much less, only $6.3 million per year. When Bolton missed part of the 2023 season, Tranquill stepped up and filled in as the Mike linebacker. If the Chiefs can't reach a long-term deal with Bolton and decide to let him walk, they have a solid backup in Tranquill. It's also possible that Leo Chenal's role could increase in 2025. He has a ton of potential, and we'd love to see more of him on the field. Plus, there's always the draft to consider. I wouldn't blame Charles Omenihu for trying to get a bigger deal, but if the Chiefs could somehow bring him back for something similar to the 2-year $16 million contract they gave him 2 years ago, that would be a no-brainer for me. Even if it costs a little more, it's worth it. The defensive line is going to be a key area to watch, though, because Chris Jones can't do it all by himself. We saw how much the pass rush struggled when he left the game in the Super Bowl, which was very disappointing. Chris Jones is paid a lot of money because he's the best in the business and a game changer, but the team needs other players to step up. Having Omenihu back in the rotation on the defensive line is crucial, and I'd love to see him return if possible. I'm also hopeful that FAU, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, steps up and George Karlaftis continues to perform well. The team needs to keep adding to the defensive line. Now, shifting to the offense, specifically the wide receiver room, which is another area to keep an eye on. The Chiefs currently have 5 wide receivers set to hit free agency: DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Justin Watson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Mecole Hardman. That leaves Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy as the main 2 wide receivers under contract for next year. Both of them are an exciting pair, especially considering how good Rice looked before his injury and how fantastic Worthy was at the end of the season. Nico Riggio is also under contract for under $1 million and will likely make the roster as a returner and depth piece. So that's 3 wide receivers. The 4th could be Sky Moore, who is in the final year of his rookie contract. But I'm not so sure he'll remain on the roster when it's time to make cuts. After all, Moore only had 3 targets, 0 catches, and 0 yards last season. He also ended the back half of the season on IR due to a core muscle injury that required surgery. His best season was actually his rookie year, but 2022 and 2023 were similar with just around 20 catches for 250 yards. Nico Riggio could probably do that. So, I think the Sky Moore project might be over. There are also other receivers on the 90-man roster, like Jason Brownlee, Justin Ross, and Tyquan Thornton, who recently signed reserve future contracts. But it's unclear if any of them will actually make the 53-man roster, and even if they do, would they be reliable, dependable targets for Patrick Mahomes, especially considering Rice is likely to miss the first 4 to 6 games due to suspension? I have no idea exactly how long the suspension will be, but it's likely that Rice will miss the start of the season. That means the Chiefs need at least one more reliable wide receiver that Patrick Mahomes can trust, especially if injuries happen again. We saw last year how injuries impacted both sides of the ball, but despite that, the Chiefs made it to the Super Bowl. It was amazing, but then, well, we got crushed in Super Bowl 59. Not a fun memory. I have some serious PTSD from that game, but moving on, the Chiefs definitely need another solid wide receiver. That's why I think it would make sense to bring back Marquise Hollywood Brown. Why not? Sure, he had some injury issues last season, which hurt his value, but he's still only 28 years old at the start of next season. So, why not try to bring him back for a couple more years? Last year, the Chiefs signed him to a one-year $7 million deal, and I think they could potentially bring him back for around that amount. Maybe a 2-year deal worth $18 million, give or take $1 million or $2. It could be a smart move in my opinion. He fits a solid role on the offense, and combining him with a healthy Rice and Worthy would make for a strong wide receiver trio. Now, there are other intriguing wide receivers set to hit free agency. Players like Stefon Diggs, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Darius Slayton, DJ Chark, and of course, DeAndre Hopkins. Starting with Hopkins, though, I'm not sure if he'll return. He's going to be 33 in June, and honestly, outside of his age, he didn't do too much after the Chiefs traded for him. Since December, he averaged around 3 catches for about 20 yards per game. Mahomes loves throwing to open receivers, but D-Hop's game has shifted. He's more of a throw it to me and I'll win the battle type of guy. At this stage of his career, he's not the same at creating separation with his roots. Some of the other guys I mentioned are interesting too, but Diggs is coming off an ACL tear, and he's 30 years old. T. Higgins, on the other hand, will likely be the most sought-after wide receiver in free agency. He's only 26 and could command a deal worth roughly $30 million per year. If the Bengals don't franchise tag him, T. Higgins could hit the market, but it seems like they'll probably tag him without hesitation, even though it would be the second year in a row, and sure enough, it was announced later that the Bengals plan to franchise tag T. Higgins, so he's likely off the market. There might be a tag-and-trade scenario, but we'll have to wait and see. With that, let's talk about Chris Godwin. His value just went up, for sure. Godwin is an interesting option, but he's coming off a dislocated ankle. While he'll probably be healthy soon enough, his market value will likely be over $20 million per year. That's why I circle back to Marquise Hollywood Brown, who might be available on a 2-year deal for less than the cost of 1 year of Chris Godwin. With all that said, which wide receiver would you like the Chiefs to bring back? Do you like the idea of bringing back Hollywood Brown? Or do you prefer someone else who's going to hit free agency? Let me know your thoughts on the wide receiver room and how it looks right now in the comments below. Next, let's briefly touch on the running back room, which is one to watch. Isaiah Pacheco is the only player locked in for the 2025 starting roster. Both Jerick McKinnon and Kareem Hunt are free agents. With this being a strong running back draft class, I think the Chiefs might look to draft a guy, especially considering Pacheco will be in the last year of his deal in the 2025 season. McKinnon could be a good fit to bring back as a third down back, but only at the right price. As for Kareem Hunt, he's a bit more of a wait-and-see guy for me. He had a solid season despite no offseason or training camp, so a full offseason could help him do even better. However, he'll be 30 in August, which is a similar age to McKinnon, but the role of a third down back is different from that of someone like Hunt. The role of a third down back is different because it's not as physically demanding. These guys could be brought back later in free agency, after the draft, depending on how things go. The Chiefs could go into the draft with Pacheco as the main guy and see if they can land a rookie or someone who can contribute as a third down back or another running back. Personally, I'd love to see that because I think a dynamic running back is needed. Pacheco will likely be better coming off his ankle surgery, but you definitely want another solid back in case of emergency and to complement Pacheco. I also saw a few comments last week asking why anyone would want to bring Kareem Hunt back. To be clear, I'm not saying the Chiefs are definitely interested in him. I'm just sharing my thoughts based on the roster needs and how the draft plays out. Hunt could be an option if necessary, especially considering he had 728 yards in just 13 games last season, all while not having any off-season training, preseason, or ramp-up time. He was thrown into action and had to catch up from the start, even struggling to get out of bed after his first game. Regarding the Chiefs' salary cap, some of you might be wondering how they're going to free up space. Some creators have said the Chiefs are in cap hell, but that's not accurate at all. Right now, the Chiefs have about $5 million in cap space, and they'll need to make some moves to free up more. If Travis Kelce retires, that would clear about $17 million. The Chiefs also have Noah Gray and Jared Y under contract, with Y coming off an ACL tear. That makes for a pretty solid tight end group, so I'm not sure they'll need to draft anyone at that position. If Travis Kelce retires, it frees up about $17 million. Even if he stays for one more season, I'm not sure he'll remain the main focus of the offense, and his $19.8 million cap hit might not stay as high. The Chiefs will likely also work on lowering Patrick Mahomes' $66 million cap hit, something they've done almost every year since he signed his deal. There's a real possibility of extending Joe Thuney, which would reduce his cap hit. You could also look at other large cap hits for 2025, like Chris Jones, Jawan Taylor, Creed Humphrey, and Drew Tranquill, and adjust their contracts to create more cap space this season. Chiefs owner Clark Hunt is generally more cautious with spending, and the team is 28th in cap dollars for void years. But this is something they can definitely work with, just like the Eagles did. They had a lot of void years and still managed to win the Super Bowl last week. While using void years requires more spending, the Chiefs don't have to go all in like the Saints do, always being in cap trouble. The Chiefs could be more aggressive with their cap space if they choose to, and it could be worth doing so given the current state of the roster. Aside from all the players I've talked about today, I'd also like to see some coaching changes, especially on the offensive side of the ball.